Okay, y'all. Linux episode 28. James is MIA. We're not quite sure what's going on. He was about 90 minutes ago. He was all happy that we were able to shift the time back to the time he needed it to be, and now he's MIA. So we hope some car hasn't hit him or something, and it's just his internet's out or something. But before we get into dealing with what can only be described as a troll, for those of you who don't know, a few weeks back, somebody sent, basically, I switched to Linux because Windows sucked, and I switched away from Linux because Linux sucked, and their thumbnail was Adolf Hitler, and they basically rambled on and just thought about it. They said, if you don't address my concerns here, you're clearly a Linux fanboy. I know you are. And then, because I want to try and keep this semi-G, let's just say they rounded off their letter by saying the important part of the whole platform debate is to have a happy ending, and they provided links to sites for me for shaving kits and things like that. So to this day, I still don't know what the problem is with my beard, but oh well. It's like I don't like to shave people. Okay, every so often I get sick of it. But it's like, but before we get into that, there's some people have been asking Q&As like we asked. We want them to keep doing that, so let's take a moment to address these. The first one is a great question. I'm just not sure it has a good answer. And somebody was basically asking is what's available for somebody who, wants to indulge in Linux and yada and so forth. The other part of their question was how do they give back to the community. One of the things I think as far as the second part of that goes, people think when it comes to Linux, they're like, if I'm not a coder, if I'm not a programmer, if I can't compile stuff, I can't contribute anything, therefore I'm the ultimate leech, and I'm not happy with that, even though I like the idea of open source, and it's a little intimidating to get into in the first place. I would say that was true 10, 15 years ago. For probably the last 7, definitely the last 3, you really don't need to know anything about your computer other than you want to use it to get into Linux and contribute to Linux by making people who aren't aware of Linux aware that it's an option. Do you necessarily disagree with that, or?
No, honestly, the best thing that people can do for Linux right now, if you don't have any sort of experience in fixing the bugs or in creating new software or anything, is just letting other people know that it exists, showing them how it can work, maybe even helping them fix the problems they might be having with getting it running or keeping it running. So many people end up trying out Linux and saying, well, all of my Windows software doesn't work, so I quit. This is stupid.
That's the one rub when it comes to moving over to Linux. There have been leaps and bounds with wine and crossover, and they're kind of like the bastard stepchildren of Linux, and that which was part of why they were the first 2 things I talked about when I started talking about Linux. They're kind of, even though they open a whole can of problems, they're on my, if I'm brand new to Linux, the pack to add. Even though you're opening yourself to Windows viruses and everything else, because then you can run all your Windows EXEs, well, not all of them, but like 90% plus of them. There's a few niche things that just will never run right in Wine for legal reasons.
Right.
Because Wine is not Windows, and it can't be Windows without infringing on Microsoft's patents. It can't do it. And that way, it's actually for the first year I was using Linux as my primary OS, and when I switched to Linux, I switched to Linux. I refused to use Windows for 90 days. I'm like, I'm going to do it in Linux. I dedicated to that, and I'm happier for it. But initially, I wasn't using RMOC. I wasn't using the Linux software. I installed Wine, and I was using Winamp because I was used to using Winamp. It was the little things like that. RMOC is a much better player, but I was used to using Winamp. And that's one of those things a novice user is going to want. They're like, I want to play my music in Winamp. I like Winamp. I've used Winamp for years. They'll eventually get over that.
Right. I was talking to somebody in my IRC channel earlier who was asking about a Yahoo Messenger, specifically the Yahoo Messenger, and a piece of software that's designed for Windows only that helps with the deaf and hard of hearing sign language something. I'm not sure exactly, but it was Windows only, and the Yahoo client is there is a native Yahoo type app, but most people just use Pigeon or Empathy for it. So we were kind of directing him in that way, and well, if your Windows only software will work, it'll work in Wine, maybe. I have never tried to run Trillion, which is the one I use Windows side for Sonnet, but as I recall, Trillion actually does work pretty well in Wine. I think. I don't actually know because I've never done it myself, but I think it does. And so it's like, I don't know if the actual Yahoo client does. And like IM, that one of the problems that creeps its way to Linux when to that is for some reason every IM on the planet keeps trying to break third-party software compatibility. I don't know why. They just, it's like they're not happy until it only works with their client. I have no idea why. The only thing I could guess would be they must bundle ads in with their own software, and they've got to make money somehow.
I guess. I don't know.
At the end of the day, a lot of things come down to money.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's like, I mean, try it out. Try a good user-friendly distro. The short list is PCLin, Mint, depending whether you like GNOME or KDE. I recommend trying both. If you're looking at Sun,
Yeah, I mean, every person has their own preferences. So GNOME might be great for one person, KDE is going to be great for another. LXDE, Fluxbox, XFCE, they all exist for a reason.
Yeah, that's the thing. Honestly, what you should do is narrow your choice down to about 5 or 6 distros. Try each of them for either a weekend or a week, and then figure which one you want to sit down and dedicate the month to learn. Okay, this is slightly different. Granted, it's not like you got to reinvent the wheel. It's those little tweak things.
Well, another thing I've noticed that's actually kind of helpful if you're just getting into it from the beginning is if you have somebody else locally that works with Linux, that's familiar with Linux, use what they're using. At least start out with what they're using, because it's nice to have that person nearby that you can go to and say, I'm having some trouble with this. What would you do in this situation? I know a lot of the people around me, they've come to me asking for help with this and that and the other, and in the past when I was using Ubuntu 100%, I would point them to Ubuntu and I could help out with the problems a whole lot easier.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, the sign we're painting on ourselves by doing Linux content is, I don't know if you're getting as many people messaging you for all the stuff you've said in your vids, but I definitely am.
Yeah.
Once again, YouTube has fixed the message system so I can tell which messages are new, so I can actually answer questions in a timely manner again. For those of you who I haven't, I apologize, but there was a period of 2 weeks there where I couldn't tell which questions were new and which ones weren't, thanks to YouTube changing the way that worked. Anyways, second question here, okay, this is a 2-tier question, and this has to do with codecs and everything else. To answer this guy's question, this was the guy who was asking about adding the CSS libraries for DVDs. He's actually on Ubuntu, but his question was, how do you add it if you're on a distro that just doesn't have it? I'm with you. I have yet to find a distro that it isn't in there. It's just sometimes called something different.
And generally, if it's not in the default repositories, whatever distro it is probably has documentation that will talk about it, because inevitably people want to watch movies, and it doesn't matter what distro you're on, you're going to want to watch a movie.
Yeah, the research I found, it's like apparently in Ubuntu, it's in a restricted extras or something. You were saying there's an easier way to just add this to the DVD lab in Ubuntu?
Yes. There's actually a repository called Medibuntu, Medibuntu. You go to medibuntu.org. There's a repository you just add that repository to your system. It's got one big long command that just determines what version of Ubuntu you're on, adds all the repository information for you, and they've got a whole wiki page on the Ubuntu site with how to install individual packages and play encrypted DVDs and all of that fun stuff, adding in extra codecs and fonts and all sorts of stuff like that. So
okay, can you add like the URL for that or whatever into this show note page so I can paste it into the description of the video when it gets posted? And it's on, so anybody watching this video can just click and go straight there. Make it easy on them. And the other question, which is really more just for fun before we get into dealing with this troll guy, I don't know how serious somebody was going, but they were asking, say, what was it, do we hate Java or Flash more, basically? I'm not sure we really hate either one of them.
There are very few things in life that I hate. That's a really, really strong word. But between the two, I would have to say Java. I dislike Java more because I've actually had experience designing software with Java, and while it's wonderful that it's cross-platform compatible and you can make it look and feel however you want to on whatever platform, the amount of stuff you have to go through to get it working, the amount of bloat that comes along with it, and just the general slowdown associated with it, it's painful. Yeah. I haven't found a piece of software that runs on Java that doesn't significantly slow down the system. Now, Flash does the same sort of thing, but usually it's not as bad, especially not with the newer versions of Flash.
Well, and here's the thing. To be honest, neither one of them really bug me. I wish both of them would go away, but they don't really bug me. I accept the reality that people are using them now, but I understand there are things that are primed to replace them, and I hope soon. The sooner the better. Right. But until that actually happens, I'll mess with them because you have to. It's like, and I'm not gonna. I'm not a purist. I don't go, well, I'm gonna refuse to use it just because it sucks. It's like, I'm not a dictator. I don't get to tell the world the shape it is. I can advise it and say I'd like it to be this shape, but it doesn't have to listen to me. It's like, So, yeah. Yeah, it's the, as far as that, Ubuntu, as far as Ubuntu goes for some, is there a legal reason really that you're not, the legal reasons behind CSS is you're not allowed to rip it, but with the court ruling saying it's okay as long as you're using it just to watch DVDs, I've honestly wondered why Ubuntu's still being iffy about including CSS by default.
Well, I think in non-US countries, I think there are some other countries that there are still legal issues with it, and one way or another, it's still a fine line. So is that does promote? So
is that why on the Ubuntu site there's still this big legal warning? It's like, check your local laws. This may be a crime.
Right, and it could just be that they haven't gotten to the point where they're including it, because Ubuntu, while they have a lot of great software available, it's not always up to date. Which, they might wait for the next release cycle to even consider something like that.
So basically, Ubuntu users may need to wait till next year and the next build of Ubuntu for that to catch up with the court rulings.
It's entirely possible, but yeah, like you were saying, that they may just want to be dealing with the local, to make sure that wherever you are locally that it is legal, because a lot of the distros that do include it by default or do make it readily available, they are skimming some legal borders.
Well, I think the issue that comes up is technically if you're using the Linux version of CSS, which, for those libraries, you can bypass the whole region system, which I've never understood why it exists in the first place. But you could. You could play. You could do the horrible thing of playing a European DVD in the U.S. or vice versa.
Yeah. So terrible.
Yeah.